Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for joining this session. Today we'll be talking about enhancing application security with an internal developer portal. Sessions should be around 30 minutes, give or take. We're going to have a live coding session at the end and some time for Q&A. If you have some late joiners or if later on you want to pass the session on to friends or colleagues, then don't worry about it. We're going to send you a recording and once the session is over and it's uploaded to our YouTube channel. In addition, feel free to ask any questions you have through the Q&A and the chat. Well, I'll do my best to answer as we go, but some things might get pushed to the Q&A session, but we will address every question. With that, let's get started. So first of all, a bit about me. My name is Moore, and I'm a lead architect here at Port. I come from a software engineering background, currently acting as a solution architect and also DevOps lead in Port. Over the past year or so, I've done many webinars for Port and also for the CNCF, including the Introduction to Developer Experience, Abstracting Kubernetes with Developer Portals, and many more. If you check out our YouTube channel, you can see most of the sessions, and I'm sure that if you find this session useful, you will also find those sessions useful as well. A bit about me, I really love video games, bouldering, and burgers. If you're ever in the Tel Aviv area, feel free to hit me up. You can see my Twitter and my mail here, and I will definitely have a nice recommendation for you. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We went through the introduction, and now we're going to talk about the core pillars of the developer portal. After that, we're going to talk about why developers love application security tools, why they are sometimes overwhelmed by those tools, how developer portals can help with that and enhance the experience and productivity provided by application security tools. We're going to have our live coding session, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So let's get started. First of all, let's talk about the core pillars of a developer portal. So we at Port see a developer portal as a piece combined by four main pillars. Those are the software catalog, which is the layer that lets you bring all the information into one place and get that single pane of glass, that single source of truth for everything that's happening in your infrastructure. That can be your services, your packages, your cloud infrastructure, your Kubernetes resources, and so on. It all goes inside the software catalog, and it benefits from being in one place, and it benefits from having the added context that the developer portal can provide. Next, we have the self-service pillar, which is all about enabling developer productivity and autonomy by providing self-service actions, which are signed off by the platform team and the DevOps team, and giving developers a way to gain more independence and perform mundane tasks that they usually require tickets for, and giving them a way to perform those actions on their own. Then we have the scorecards pillar, which is all about visualization and actually giving more context and more organizational standards and goals to the data that you have in software catalog. So you can configure things such as your security standards or your production readiness or your documentation maturity and so on, and leverage the information that you have in the software catalog, in the developer portal, to make the most of that information, and also set some clear goals on how you want to tackle areas where you're not up to your organizational standard just yet. And then lastly, we have the workflow automation pillar, which is all about leveraging the information and abilities that the portal provides for machines and for automated tasks. As time went on, we saw that more and more customers pouring a lot of high quality data into the software catalog and into the developer portal. And that data can also be used by CI/CD pipelines, by scripts, by APIs, and even as a trigger for certain events. For example, automatically paging the on-call in case that a new incident entity has been created inside the portal, for example. Now, of course, all of this is surrounded by a strong role-based access control layer, which makes sure that only the correct personas see the sensitive information in software catalog, only the correct developers have access to the self-service actions that are designated for them, teams are able to see scorecards which are relevant for them in order to avoid complexity and avoiding fatigue and so on. And of course, we have the R&D insights and reports, which are all about visualizing data and actually generating some reports which give you an at a glance view of how things are going, what are your most important tasks for the time being, and also combining with scorecards, what are the goals that you want to achieve over the next period of time to make our infrastructure and our software development the best that it can be. Now, of course, all of this is exposed through the developer portal interface, which in our case is a UI interface or an API interface, along with the rest of our integrations. So yeah, these are the core pillars of the developer portal. This is a concept that we've talked about before, but I like to mention it before we dive into every webinar, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all understanding what we're talking about. With that, let's start talking about application security. So why do developers love application security tools? So the first reason is that keeping up with new vulnerabilities is an ongoing battle. For projects using popular and vibrant languages such as JavaScript, JSON, or even Go, it is not uncommon for multiple vulnerabilities to be detected every week with varying degrees of severity. That means that figuring out what needs to be fixed and also keeping up with the latest fixes and understanding the newest vulnerabilities is an ongoing battle. It's very difficult, it can be very daunting. And so application security tools take that complexity away by telling us, okay, this project has these abilities, this is the severity, this is something you should take a look at and try to solve. Another reason that developers love application security tools is they help you understand what is the required fix, which is not always trivial. So dependencies is not just about updating the package to the latest version. It can have a blast radius, it can cause some regressions, and that vulnerable dependency might be some peer dependency or something that your package relies on, but it's not a direct dependency of your project. So understanding that and understanding the exact impact and how to approach it is not so trivial, and application security tools help us with that. And lastly, having an automated scanning process streamlines work and prevents mistakes. So today in your development process, it's pretty standard to work on the features, continue development, adding a new package, adding some new capability, and over time, those packages start to become a bit more legacy. Maybe you don't keep all of them up to date. And so that means that the vulnerabilities start to stack up. And these automated scanning tools provided by application security make it very easy to stay on top of things and understand, okay, what needs to be fixed and when and why is it important. But that means that it's not all perfect. There are some challenges. So developers can easily be overwhelmed by application security tools. And the reasons for that are, first of all, the number of vulnerabilities is so high, even for simple projects. If I go now and I create just the most basic JavaScript project with Node.js, I assure you that unless I'm using all of the latest packages and all of the most popular ones, it will definitely have some vulnerabilities. And so that makes it very difficult to stay on top of things, even when I'm talking about simple projects, let alone when I'm talking about big organizations with a lot of code, with microservices that might be a bit more legacy, and so on. Next, application security tools don't know which vulnerabilities really matter for you. They usually don't have the correct context to understand, okay, is this critical vulnerability in this super important library is something that is critical and can actually be used by an attacker. For example, if this service is just some internal documentation, it's quite unlikely that it can be used as an attack vector. But then again, the application security tool doesn't know that. For it, it might as well be the most mission critical and core microservice that I have in my infrastructure. And this is something we'll get back to later when we talk about how developer portals solve this issue. Now, Another issue is that for companies just starting with their application security journey, getting to a steady state can seem like a long and daunting process. Even for a company that is 3 months old, setting up new application security tools means that they're immediately bombarded with hundreds or thousands of vulnerabilities, and knowing which one to tackle first can be very complex to understand, and it can make it a very daunting and frightening process to understand, okay, how do I go from hundreds of vulnerabilities to 0 vulnerabilities that I actually care about? Because that's what matters. It's not about getting to 0, it's about getting to 0 where it matters. So how do developer portals enhance application security and help us solve these issues? So first of all, developer portals are your single pane of glass, both for your software development lifecycle and for your infrastructure. That means they are the best built tools to have all the context and have all the information to understand what are my processes, what are my vulnerabilities, how those two connect with one another, and how you should approach to solving those issues. And again, as we said, they are the best place to store metadata, both about SDLC and security, but also about other things such as our cloud resources, our development processes, our Git repos, our permissions, and so on. So they make it very easy to make connection both between security and software development lifecycle in SDLC, but also between other components, which might help us understand what is the correct vulnerability to tackle now and what is actually important. Now, another point is that developer portals have additional context that a single tool on its own does not. Because, for example, with Port, we offer so many integrations to bring information from all the relevant resources. It makes it very easy to get that single pane of glass and add to it the additional context powered by Port's entity graph and powered by the understanding of how the pieces connect. What actual packages does a microservice use? What are the versions? What are the vulnerable versions provided by the application security tool? Where is that deployed? Is it deployed in production? Is it mission critical? And so on, which is also something where we're going to see in the live demo, because we're going to see exactly how Port enables that additional context and how it helps you understand what choices should you focus on next. And lastly, with scorecards and self-service actions, developer portals unlock a deeper layer of visibility and functionality enabled under one convenient rooftop. So with scorecards, we can easily create a scorecard for security or production readiness and make sure that we have rules such as services with critical vulnerabilities can't deploy to production. That is very simple to do, and it's very effective because we can always stay on top of our production readiness and understand, okay, these services are not meeting our standards, they are a risk, so we need to take care of them before we go ahead and start deploying them to production and making sure that we take care of those things before we actually go forward with development. Another thing is that since our self-service actions take advantage of the data in the portal, we can also use them as guardrails and as a way to protect ourselves from those deployments happen by mistakes or a deployment that somehow gets in and deploys a vulnerability. So self-service actions powered by the developer portal and the scorecards can give us that additional layer of guardrails. And so with that, now we're going to go to the live coding session, which is where we'll actually see all of this taking place in practice. So the first step, we're going to start with a basic data model provided by our Git provider. Now, all of that is already set up in the port instance that I'm going to show you. But after that, we're going to start building on top of that and adding more information. So the second step is going to be to extend the data model with information from our application security tool. And we're going to see how we make that addition very quickly and very efficiently with just one step. And already we're going to start seeing some quality information flowing into the developer portal. After that, we're going to use that new information to create new dashboards, both for developers and for engineering managers, so everyone can stay in the loop and everyone can understand our security standing. And lastly, we're going to leverage self-service actions, but we're going to show how we're creating guardrails to make sure that only secure services can be deployed. So with that, let's get to the demo. So this here is my port instance Right now, it's very simple. Also, by the way, I want to mention that we just released a new onboarding experience for work. So in case you haven't tried it out yet, I highly suggest that you sign up and go through the onboarding experience. It will make it very simple to get started. This account here is slightly different from the onboarding experience. I just made some modifications to the homepage, but aside from that, it's very similar to the experience that you're going to get out of the box. And now we're going to take a look at what we have getting started and how we plan to extend. So first of all, if we go to the catalog, you can see here the list of all of my services coming from my GitHub. And you can see here, for example, the current production readiness according to the built-in scorecard. You can see the tier of services, the language, the URL, and so on. And of course, as always with Port, all these can be customized and extended according to your needs. In addition, we have a services dashboard, which gives us an at-a-glance look at our services that we have. And we have our production readiness dashboard, which is going to be very relevant because we're going to extend it a bit and show you how it interacts with the new application security information that we bring in. So in order to do that, let's go to the builder. And you can see that right now we just have the service blueprint. But what I want to do now is I want to add a new data source. And the data source I'm going to add is I'm going to add our Snyk integration provided by our Ocean framework. So this here will show you the installation command in case you have your port instance and you want to install the Snyk integration. For me, I already have the command set up. So I'm just going to run it and it's going to deploy. And now let's just give it a minute before it finishes and starts setting up the integration. It's going to create some blueprints for us, and it's also going to automatically start bringing information into port. So let's just give it a second, make sure it's all running. Yeah, so I can see that it already started, and there we go. We can already see that we have a new data source. So the integration has started, and it's now going to work on bringing that new information in. So you can see here in the builder that we already have new blueprints. And of course, all these blueprints were not here just a second ago. They are all provided by the Ocean integration. So Ocean integrations come out of the box with a config and also with blueprints and relations and even pages and scorecards. So it really does all of the heavy lifting for us. And now, if we go to the catalog, we can already see the information flowing. So I can see here my Snyk targets, which are my Git repositories, and we can already see all the information, what vulnerabilities I have and what is their severity. We can also see here all the projects. So these are specific components inside a given repository or a given target, which I can tackle. So you can see here, for example, Docker files, requirements TXT files, package JSONs, and so on, depending on the different language of the project that I'm looking at. And of course, I can see all the specific vulnerabilities and their severity, the package version, so on, is it patched or not, and even go directly to Snyk to see the vulnerability information. So all this is right here. Again, this is completely out of the box. All we did was install the Ocean integration. We basically didn't do much until now. Now let's go ahead and extend that a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to add a new blueprint. Now, forgive me for using JSON in this case. I'm going to show you exactly what we created in just a second. I just want to make sure that we're creating the blueprint with all the properties, and then we're going to see exactly what we created. There we go. So now we have a new pull request blueprint. And again, this blueprint, I just took it from our docs. There's no need to change anything. It's ready out of the box, just copy and paste. And this will bring us pull request information. And so in order for that to bring us pull request information, we're going to go to our data sources again and update the mapping for our GitHub integration. Now, the reason that I'm bringing pull request information is I want to show you how we can create a custom dashboard that shows us what actual security pull requests we have open right now. So again, what I did, I just added a new mapping to our GitHub integration config. It's going to bring us pull request information, and it's going to tie it to our service blueprint. So we'll give that a few seconds. It's going to get started working. In the meantime, while that is flowing in, I want to make another change to the data model. So as I mentioned before, we have here our services, which are our Git repositories. And in addition to that, we have here our sneak targets, which are, again, very similar to Git repositories, but in a way that Sneak keeps track of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie those two data sources together, and we're going to create a relation. So we're going to tie the Sneak target to a GitHub service. And what's that going to do is it's going to make it possible for a given service to take a look at all of its vulnerabilities and also make a summary of the number of those vulnerabilities and have that available to us directly on the service. So again, in order to make that update, remember that we just now created a relation. So let me close this up so it's a bit more clear. So we just now made a relation by the from sneak target to service. But that doesn't mean that things will be mapped just yet, because we need to update the mapping for the integration. So let's go ahead and do just that. And this is a perfect example of how simple it is to update the mapping, because the sneak integration is perfectly set up for us. And there's only one line that we need to add in order to actually make the mapping. So you can see it right here. We're saying that we're going to map the relation for service by taking the display name, splitting it up with a / because that's how Sneak keeps it, because it also keeps track of the GitHub organization. We're just going to take the last item. And this is a very simple mapping update. And once I click on save and resync, we'll just give it a few seconds. And we'll see how all of a sudden our Sneak targets are perfectly mapped to our services. And while we wait for that, I see that we have a question. So Tiberius asks, what is the Ocean integration? And can we use other CASC and SCA tools instead of Sneak? So that is an excellent question. Ocean is our open source framework for integrations. Basically, it's a framework that we developed in-house to make it very easy to develop new integrations for Core. We use it ourselves when we develop new integrations. And since it is open source, you can also use it to develop new integrations in case Core doesn't have the integrations that you need just yet. And so they make it very easy to develop a new integration, because we have done all of the heavy lifting of working with Core's API and actually interacting with it. All you need to do is write the logic that will query your third party. So in this case, Sneak. But of course, we have a lot of data sources for a lot of integrations, so Opsgenie and PagerDuty and ServiceNow and so on. So all you need to do is write the logic to bring that information, and then the Ocean framework itself will take care of the data and send it back to Core. So that saves you a lot of the trouble in developing a new integration, and it really does make developing an integration very simple and straightforward thing, and which is also helping us develop more integrations more quickly. Now, as for the second part of your questions about can we use other security tools? So yes, 100%. Right now we have Sneak as an example, but since we're also talking about the GitHub integration here, we also support bringing Dependabot information and alerts from GitHub. So that is another way to understand the vulnerabilities and alerts that you have on your Git repositories. And of course, if you have a different tool which might not have an integration just yet, you can either open a roadmap ticket on our open roadmap, or you can develop the integration yourself and open a pull request in the Ocean repository. We'd love to see it. We'd love to review it and bring it inside. I know that a lot of members of the community really like that our repositories are open source and they can contribute, and a lot of members have contributed over time. So if you see a tool that we don't have an integration for just yet, feel free. Okay, So now we can already see that we have pull request information, again, brought directly from GitHub. And in addition to that, we can also see in the sneak targets that we now have a new service relation. So we can see for every sneak target, what is the related service. Now this helps because when we go to a specific service, we can take a look and see, okay, these are all its pull requests, and also this is the sneak target. And so we can see what vulnerabilities we have, and it's all at a glance from the service view. What I want to do now is I want to do two things. First is I'm going to update our scorecard for production readiness with two new rules. And before I do that, I'm going to add two new properties to the service blueprint. So this is an addition that we've made quite recently of what we call an aggregation property, which allows us to leverage information from the rest of the graph when we're bringing over information to a single entity. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a property for critical vulnerabilities. And we're going to give it the type of aggregation. And we're going to take that from sneak targets, and which, if you recall, we connected to the service blueprint just a few minutes ago. We're going to calculate by property. We're going to choose open critical vulnerabilities, and we're going to do sum. Perfect. And we're actually going to do the same thing for high vulnerabilities. So again, same drill, aggregation, choosing from sneak target, property. This time we're going with open high vulnerabilities. And again, sum. And there we go. So we're going to let that run in the background. What's actually going to happen is that Port is going to query the information from the sneak target blueprint. It's going to put it as actual values on each service entity. And because that information now lives on each service entity, we can leverage that and use that in a scorecard. So now what we're going to do is we're going to extend our production readiness scorecard with two new rules. So again, forgive me just for copying. This will make it much simpler. So we're going to add one rule for no critical vulnerabilities. And this is a bronze level rule. So it means in order for the service to pass the most basic of scorecard checks, it must pass this rule. And so what it defines is that the service does not have critical vulnerabilities. So you can see here the condition is that this new aggregation property that we just added has less than one critical vulnerability. So that's perfect. And we're actually going to add to that, and we're going to add another rule for no high vulnerabilities. So this is exactly the same thing, just this time for high severity. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now, when we go, first of all, when we go to the service page, we can already see that all of the entities that are scanned by Sneak and that have vulnerability information, we can already see those vulnerabilities. In addition, if we go to the production readiness dashboard, then we can also see which services are passing the different rules. So we can see here that only 1 out of 9 services pass the critical vulnerabilities rule. So that is definitely something that we should take a look at and take care of, because that means that our security standing is not great. So now let's take all of that information and create some visualizations from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new table to the homepage. And now remember, the homepage is a place for you to expose information to everyone in the developer portal. And so this is a great place to highlight some things that are highly important and you want to take care of immediately. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a table for open security PRs. And we're just going to select pull requests. And great, we have a new table. Now I want to filter it specifically to events that have a relation to security. So I'm going to say title contains sneak. And already you can see that we filtered out. And now this only shows us actual security PRs, actual things that we can take care of to improve our security standing and reduce the number of vulnerabilities that we have in our projects. Now, another thing we're going to do is we're going to create another table view. This one is going to be mission critical services with vulnerabilities. So again, this is a view that's going to have a lot of value because it's going to show us, okay, what are the most critical services that we have that actually need immediate taking care of because they have those critical vulnerabilities. So we're going to select this time from the service blueprint, and we're actually going to add here a filter. So in this case, we're looking only for services that are mission critical. So we're going to take from the tier property, and the value is going to be mission critical. Go ahead and save that. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a small filter to this. Let's just clean this up for a second to make it a bit easier to see. Perfect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a filter to make sure that we're only seeing services that actually have critical vulnerabilities. So yep. And now we can see here only services that actually have critical vulnerabilities and also that are mission critical. So these are the most important services to take care of as soon as possible. And in addition to that, we have here all the pull requests, so we can take a look at a given service and take a look at a given pull request and say, okay, I have everything I need to take care of this right now. I can just step in, take a look at the pull request opened by Sneak. I can see that it is highly valuable because this is a mission critical service that has vulnerabilities. And this is that added layer of information and context that developer portals give you. Because most of the time, your application security tool, such as Sneak, is not aware of what service is actually mission critical, what is actually important, what is actually an attack vector that is relevant. And so by utilizing the information from the software catalog, you can actually bring that forward and have that added layer of context. So let's just clean this up. Also a chance to show you our new drag and drop feature and resizing for dashboards. This looks perfect now. And now I want to create another manager dashboard. And I see another question from Tiberius before we go on. So Tiberius says, you just created a mission critical project with vulnerabilities. I want to shift left to the developer as much as possible. Is there a way to alert the developer directly, for example, via Slack, if the project changes and discovers that it now has a new vulnerability, or if the project goes from silver to bronze because of new high vulnerabilities, etc. So that is a perfect question because that is possible to work. So it is possible in a multitude of ways. The most convenient one is we have in our docs instructions on how to create Slack reminders from scorecards. So for example, we now have the production readiness scorecard, which we added some security information to. So what you can do is you can add those security rules similar to the ones I've showed you here, and make sure that a Slack reminder, which is supported by port out of the box, is sent every time that the scorecard changes from bronze to silver, or more likely from silver or from gold to bronze. And that will always keep your developers up to date when a new vulnerability has suddenly appeared, and they should take care of it. And again, this can also be done through our workflow automation layer. So you can even make it an automated process as soon as a new critical vulnerability appears for a given Sneak target or for a given service. you just have an automation and send a webhook or send a Slack message to the Slack channel to make it an even more immediate process. So what we created in the homepage is a view for our developers to take care of the vulnerabilities. But sometimes consumers of the portal can also be engineering managers. So what I want to do now is I want to create an engineering security dashboard. So let's go ahead and create that. And what we're going to get is an empty dashboard, and we're going to add some more visualizations to it. So first of all, we're going to start with a pie chart. So this will be vulnerabilities by severity. And we can simply select the issue severity from here and create that. So we already have that. And we're going to add another pie chart, a bit of a different one, which will be vulnerability by language. So this will help us understand which frameworks are more vulnerable in our environment, what should get more focus. So great, we have those two. And I want to create two new tables. And again, all of this will be available in an open source public repository, which contains all of the JSONs and all of the blueprints and the self-service actions that we're going to show in just 2 minutes. So don't be afraid if it's a lot to keep track of. And also remember the session will be recorded and will be sent to you, so you can always go back and retrace the steps. And this is just a way for me to show you how we can create a lot of value very quickly, because if you recall, we started the live demo, I believe, less than 15 minutes ago, and already we have a lot of high quality information that we can expose to our developers. So let's do services with the highest number of vulnerabilities. And we're just going to take the service blueprint for this, because we added those properties that contain the vulnerability information. Let's drag this over here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some sorting. So we're going to sort by critical vulnerabilities first, and then we're going to sort by high vulnerabilities second. And this helps us understand exactly what services are most critical to take care of, but from a more of a manager high-level point of view. So perfect. We have all of that information. Up until now, everything was part of the software catalog, visualizations, and scorecards. Now we want to add a bit of self-service into the mix. So it is very likely that as time goes on and you invest more in port and in your developer portal, you will want to give developers the autonomy to deploy new services or deploy existing services directly from the developer portal, because it already has all of the information. So we're going to do just that, but we're going to add an extra guardrail. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new action for the service blueprint. It's going to be called deploy service. And we're going to use GitHub Actions for that. It's going to be day 2. We're going to start a deployment process for an existing service that we have in the catalog. So let's just add here an input for environment. And this can be used to filter out and add an additional guardrail. So for example, what I'm going to show you is disabling deployments for a service that has critical vulnerabilities. But we do have the option to limit that check only to services that are getting deployed to production. So for example, maybe you don't want to block deployments to tests for services that have vulnerabilities, because that's part of the development process, and you're going to fix it internally before it goes out to production. So let's just add here production, staging, and test. Give it nice colors. Perfect. So that is our input. And like I mentioned, we're going to use GitHub workflows and GitHub actions to run this. So in order to do that, we're going to have some inputs. So our organization is for live webinar. Our repository is for actions. And let me just grab the correct name for the workflow. Perfect. And our workflow is going to report its status through the code logic and not directly by the GitHub app understanding the status, which is why we're going to set a report workflow status to no. And we're not going to emit user inputs because remember, we added that environment input and we want to have it as part of our workflow. And for now, let's leave permissions as they are. Okay, perfect. So we have a new action, and of course, we can add permissions, we can add a description a bit later. But now let's take a look at what happens when I actually execute. So I'm going to show you two examples. First one is going to be for a service that has critical vulnerabilities. And the second one is for a service that does not have critical vulnerabilities. And so while that's running, I want to show you the actual code for the workflow, because it's going to make it easier to understand why this is actually failing or succeeding. So if you look here, this is our GitHub workflow for checking scorecards and deploying. And what's happening here is we're actually using Port's own GitHub action. So you can see here, Port Labs GitHub action V1. And we're using it for two reasons. One is to add logs to the action, which we're going to see inside Port in just a minute. And the second one is we want to actually get the scorecard values for the entity we're deploying to check that it passes our guardrail for production readiness. So you can see here that we're performing a get operation for this entity that we're trying to deploy. And we're grabbing off the value of the production readiness scorecard. And we're making a simple check to see if it is at basic, which if you recall, we set no critical vulnerabilities as bronze. So if we're at basic, that means that we have at least one critical vulnerability. And in any case that we're at basic level, we're going to stop the deployment and fail it and add a log message. And if we're not at basic, if we're at bronze or higher, we're going to go ahead and make some logs and also actually make the deployment project. So looking inside Port, we can see here that our deployment is actually failing because of this check. So you can see here that product service is not production ready, so it is stopping development. But for the other service, that deployment is currently in progress. Let's see if we can find a service with a shorter deployment, and so that will work for us. Let's just take a look. So again, we can see here all the different services. And for example, if we take a look at the notification service, we can see that it passes. So if we deploy it, it should pass the deployment just fine. And if not, that must have meant that something in the workflow, which could happen. It's easiest for it to happen in a live demo. And of course, this is part of the instances where we can go ahead and take a look at the bug things, because we have here the job link taking us directly to GitHub to take a look at the workflow. But in this instance, I can see that the service is deployed because like we saw in the catalog, this service passes our scorecard checks and our scorecard guardrails. So it got deployed and everything's perfect. And we as developers are happy because we're only deploying to production services that are safe and do not have any critical vulnerabilities. Okay, so that was the entire demo. I know that it was quite a bit, but if you look back, you will see that we didn't add that much. And in the span of probably 20-25 minutes, we've already added a lot of value and a lot of context that an application security on its own cannot provide. And we did most of it strictly with its abilities, with its integrations, with its mappings, and with its amazing blueprints and graph capability. So thank you all so much for joining the session. Again, as I mentioned, this session is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I highly suggest checking out our live demo at demo.getport.io to get inspired and see how far a developer portal can take you when it's full-fledged. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. You can see my address right here. And if you have any questions, now's the perfect time. Okay, so I can see that we have one question so far asking, is it possible to bring more information from GitHub and also more information specifically around security? So that is an excellent question. First of all, the answer is yes. It is possible to bring a lot more information. So you can bring in repositories, pull requests. You can bring in deployments. You can bring in dependable alerts, which is again around the topic of security and understanding vulnerabilities. You can also bring your actual GitHub workflows. So that helps you understand what workflows are available to your developers and exposing the correct workflows which you want to use and you want to expose to them. So all that information and a lot more can be brought from GitHub into Port. I highly suggest checking out our docs around GitHub. We have examples both for mappings and for blueprint configurations. So as I mentioned, I created a blueprint for GitHub pull request. This is taken directly from our docs. I didn't do anything special, just copy, paste, update the mapping, and you're good to go. So Mark asked, is there documentation around which security and observability providers are currently supported? So yes, you can find all that information in our documentation. So if we go to the docs, you can see here under build a software catalog and ingest data into the catalog. You can see here all the different categories that we offer. So for example, if we're taking a look at code quality and security, you can see Sneak and SonarQube here. If we're talking about monitoring and alerting, you can see New Relic and Sentry. So this includes all the list of available integrations. If we're talking specifically about integrations powered by Ocean, then you can go to Ocean's documentation and see the integrations library. And all of these docs also appear inside our standard docs, a bit more expanded with examples. But this gives you an added glance of all of the available integrations. And also, in addition to that, you can always go inside your Port account and take a look at all the available data sources. So you just do plus data source, and you can select from all the integrations here. Of course, you have the option of bringing information through an API. You can use GitOps, you can use infrastructure as code. You can even use a dynamic webhook to connect any webhook, any outbound webhook into Port and just map the data dynamically as it's flowing into the system. Okay, so I can see that we don't have any other questions. Again, thank you all so much for joining the session. You will receive the recording shortly once it's uploaded. And also it will include the repository of all the resources. And I hope you like the session. And thank you all so much.